Everybody, Adam Thompson from Bookies.com here, and we are celebrating all things North Carolina with legalized sports betting coming March 11. Pre-registration is March 1st. Bookies.com has every promo code and bonus you could possibly want. You can spend $5 to get up to $150 in free bonus bets. Your first bet could be $1,000 or even $1,500 in bonus bets. Go to the video description below to get all that stuff before you lay your first bet when you register. Speaking of North Carolina, joining me is Edgar Salmingo Jr. He lives and breathes all things Carolina Panthers football. You can find him on Twitter, X, at Panthers Analyst. You must have had to sign up pretty early to get Panthers Analyst. That seems like a coveted handle. First off, how are you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm an old head. Twitter. I remember reading somewhere yesterday saying that there's going to be a generation where nobody knows what Twitter is. So I'll be happy to carry that mantle and keep calling it Twitter until they tell me not to.
Well, North Carolina is finally getting sports betting starting March 11th. Like we said, you can sign up on March 1st, but the first bets will be March 11th, just in time for March Madness, just in time for the start of MLB season. The Masters are after that. The NBA playoffs are coming. How excited are people in the Tar Heel State with finally getting legalized sports betting?
It is insane. So many people that I've talked to, even people that are casuals, people that are in the business, just regular everyday people are just so excited, so hyped, so ready for legalized betting. And so this is a big day for the state of North Carolina, but just in general, just the sports madness that like you mentioned, all the events that are going on. I can't imagine the hype and the excitement getting any higher than it is right now.
Yeah, and North Carolina, we talk about the Carolina Panthers, the NFL. They have a lot of teams. The Hurricanes are actually a contender in the NHL. Obviously, you have Duke, North Carolina, NC State, all these sports. I think MLB might be coming to Charlotte soon. We'll see about that once expansion hits. But Carolina Panthers, last year, their win total, the over-under was 7.5. They went 2-15. First off, what happened? What led to that?
I don't know if you have a 2-hour-long podcast. No, I'm just kidding. In short, there was this vision, a brand new head coach with an all-star staff that was brought together, and it was supposed to be this diversity of thought where we had different coaches from different schools of thought that were all going to come together, sing Kumbaya, and take the number one overall pick and lead them to the promised land. I think there was a lot of dissension within those ranks. There's been a great article in The Athletic and other outlets that are talking about some of that dissension that occurred. I think that just kind of leaked onto the on-field product. I don't think I think the team has not given up on Bryce Young, the number one overall pick last year, and they have high hopes with the new head coach, Dave Canales this year. But I think it was just a combination of really, really bad roster management, talent acquisition, combined with this really, really discombobulated, incoherent, inconsistent coaching staff that eventually they let go in record time. It was just a bad mess. And the 2-15, I think it was even like a very kind record, knowing that the whole season, they never held a lead in the fourth quarter. And so to get 2 wins and never have a lead in the fourth quarter, we should be impressed by that, but even got in the win column. But yes, it was a very rough season last year.
Yeah, people talk about how, David Tepper, maybe he's a little crazy because he keeps firing these coaches so quickly. We almost have to admire the proactiveness. If it's not working and it's clear it's not going to work, what are we waiting for, right?
I think last year, Frank Reich was thought to be what we needed, a veteran presence after coming off of Matt Rule, college coach. And they said, hey, this guy has a history in the NFL and knows how to coach offenses. And I think most fans give him credit for cutting the cord early, because if this extended even further, I think it would have been even more frustration. So
now Canales comes in. He's the opposite of the veteran coach. And he's not the college coach either. He's one of these bright young minds that are getting hired around the NFL. He only had 1 year of experience as a coordinator, and that was in Tampa Bay, but he really turned around. Baker Mayfield was kind of a lost soul in the NFL, and he led them to a better record than what Tom Brady had in his last year in Tampa Bay. So what are your thoughts on Canales coming into Carolina?
I think for me and for most of the fan base, the easy phrase would be cautious optimism. I think he has a very, very proven track record of taking, like you mentioned, Baker Mayfield, and prior to that in Seattle with Geno Smith, and taking quarterbacks that nobody wanted and elevating them to the point where they're consideration for comeback player of the year. So you take that, and then you just listen to his press conferences. You get to know a little bit more about the guy. I read his book with his wife about their marriage, and you see this just effervescent, optimistic, just breath of fresh air. And you're like, man, this is the type of culture that was missing from last year, in a sense that, we need someone to make the players want to run through a wall kind of deal. But you don't have to be a jerk about it. You don't have to be a Bill Belichick. You can just be awesome, positive, motivating force that would bring out the best out of their players. And so let's be honest, the Panthers haven't had a winning season. They had 6 consecutive losing seasons. So we're not at the point where we're like, okay, this move is turn the dial. It's going to move the needle. And so cautious optimism is probably like the best description of how I and other Panthers fans feel. But at least compared to what was out there in terms of coaches, I think fans are pretty happy about who they selected, who they end up getting. And let's be honest, it's not like people were charging the door to get this job. And so someone who really, really wanted this job, somebody who really, really, really believes in Bryce Young, has a proven track record quarterbacks, I think it's rubbing off and giving a lot of positive vibes to the Panthers fans.
Yeah, and he seems very enthusiastic. He seems very personable. He seems like he knows what he's talking about. And I like right when he got hired, he said, we want to have fun too. This is the opposite of Bill Belichick hire if they would have gone that route. This guy is going to bring an energy, a youthfulness, and exuberance that, why not? You were 2-15 last year, nowhere to go but up. But Bryce Young, what did you see from him last year that gives you hope that he can still be the guy here and to expect a turnaround starting in year 2? Yeah,
the overwhelming narrative around Bryce Young was that last year was very hard to evaluate. Even like the most optimistic of Bryce Young fans, myself included, you look at the film, you look at the highlights, you look at the lowlights, you look at the all 22, and you see someone who had an offensive line that was struggling. He had 7 left guards who played last year, he had 8 right guards, offensive guards who played last year. Against the receivers that just weren't, their strength was not separating early. I remember listening to the QB school over and over again. They're saying, hey, where's Bryce Young supposed to go with the ball here? And so you get mad at him. It's like, why don't you throw the ball? Why is he getting sacked? Why is he holding the ball too long? And then you look at this all 22 and it's like, well, where is he supposed to throw it to? And so I think the very, very, very common perception, or a very, moderate perception of Bryce Young is like, hey, that was his first year. He was a rookie. Even if everything was perfect, he might have still struggled. But because of those extenuating circumstances, it's hard to tell, like, is he on the right track? Again, if they upgrade in the offseason at offensive line and wide receiver, or even just stick to one offensive lineman at left guard and right guard, and he gets some wide receivers that can separate, like, I could see an upward trajectory with Bryce Young, because he made some amazing plays last year, which you'll never see because they were 2-15 and because that was buried under a lot of lowlights. But there's a lot of optimism, especially with Dave Canales coming in, that he could turn it around next year.
What do you think Carolina needs to do? Is it get that number 1 top target? Is it to get him, more time to block? Is it get him a reliable running game? Because they brought in Miles Sanders and that did not work as far as being that RB1. I saw you mentioned on X/Twitter, all their top players are young guys on rookie scales, and yet they still don't have the money to go out and spend a ton of dough, but they do have some money. So what do you think they need to prioritize this offseason?
My personal philosophy of roster management is to be, pick something and make it your strength. Some people are like, oh, I want to be like good at everything. And because it's a salary cap league, you can't be above average in every position or every facet of the game, right? And so I think for the Panthers, especially with an offensive mind coming in, is prioritizing like, what is his culture? What is his philosophy? And just be really strong at that. So you don't have to be the best at running and passing and blocking and defense and special teams. Like, just pick the one thing that you're good at. In Dave Canales' press conference and a lot of his little appearances on different podcasts and radios, he kept on saying his vision for the Panthers is like being strong at the ball. That means like holding on to the ball and taking away the ball. I know you mentioned Miles Sanders in the running game. I would say like it was a lot to be desired. They brought in not only Dave Canales from Tampa Bay, but also the new offensive coordinators from Tampa Bay, the offensive line coaches from Tampa Bay, the run game coordinators from Tampa Bay. So we have a little bit of content, even though they're coming from a brand new team. There's a lot of continuity. I would love to see them really, really emphasize an explosive run game and take a little pressure off of Bryce Young and make him look really good, because they're worried about defending the run. And so holding on to the ball, taking the ball away, I think that's a philosophy that would translate into whatever they do in the draft and free agency. I'd also say in terms of offensive line versus wide receivers, there was this very famous, a few years ago, a famous meme when the Bengals were drafting if they should get Jamar Chase while Joe Burrow gets killed, or they should get Penei Sewell and he has no one to pass to. And so I think it's that same chicken or the egg. I think fans are just excited to see which direction they go into. But I think of the two options, I think fans are most excited about drafting a wide receiver or getting a free agent wide receiver. And I think maybe it's something that you put together, Adam, but like even trading for a top wide receiver. I know there's odds about the Panthers potentially trading for a wide receiver that's out there, but I think wide receivers, because they're the flashy part, they're fantasy football, they get the splash plays, the highlights, they catch balls, they do touchdowns. I think that's the one that fans are excited about. But me personally, just pick one of them. Offensive line, wide receiver, be amazing at that, and then be average at the other one, and they'll still be fine.
Mike Evans, bring him along to Tampa Bay. Everybody else is coming from Tampa. Let him join too. This team has a defense that was good, and the defense was put in a lot of tough positions last year because the offense struggled with turnovers and with short fields. But Brian Burns is now sitting out there, and he wants a lot of money, and Carolina offered him a lot of money, but it wasn't enough money yet. So what do you think they should do? Should they use 25 to 30 million to bring back Burns, who is, a star, or should they use that to divvy it up and improve improve the depth and improve the overall structure of the team.
It was a really good defense. To be honest, the best offensive output last year from the Panthers was against the Green Bay Packers, and the defense kind of let them down. So it's kind of like this weird, the defense was really good. Then when we really needed them, they failed and we still lost, right? And one big piece of that defense was Brian Burns. I would say on Twitter, X, the fan opinion is split. They see people like a Max Crosby. They see people like a Bosa and these types. And they're like, hey, why would he get paid up to that level when he hasn't produced or have enough sacks? And you're right. I was looking at the stats from last year. He had the least amount of opportunities to pass rush because they were always playing, from behind. And so it's hard to evaluate him in that respect. I personally think they should pay him. I don't know if it's $30 million or whatever. They didn't bring in a cap genius czar from the Kansas City Chiefs. He was the one who was notorious for negotiating Patrick Mahomes' deal, for trying to figure out how to work in Chris Jones. And so the hope is that maybe they don't go to 30 or it's 30, but it's like constructed in a way that it fits. But I think Brian Burns, not only does he give a lot on the field, but he's such a big component of this team's culture, off the field, on the field, a team captain. He's only 25 years old. He's just as old as their third round pick from last year. Like, that's how young he is. If they mess this up, if they don't figure out how to get this Brian Burns situation under control, this will have an extenuating effect on Derek Brown, who's due for an extension. This will have an effect on maybe a JC Horn, future free agents. It's not just fantasy football. It's not just rotisserie where I can say like, oh, I want this guy at this price. And if I don't want him, I'll go grab some for free agents. Like, there's a trailing effect to potentially other players who want to come to Carolina, or even just what the culture will look like, how people feel about the team if they don't treat one of their own, someone who wants to be a Carolina Panther, who's proven to be a good captain and a producer on the field, and say like, hey, we're going to lowball you. It could have some trailing effects on other players that they want.
Right. That's not a reputation you want to start, especially at a market that's tough to get free agents to begin with as you're trying to build. Now, you're also a bit of an NFL draft guru. Is it painful that Carolina should have the number one pick right now? Obviously, they made a huge trade, blockbuster last year to acquire that one. Is it going to be painful watching the draft, or do you understand kind of where they're at?
I understand. I mean, the painful part is that there's always mock drafts that are out there. It's like, oh, the Panthers are not on this mock draft, right? And so that's my personal pain. But it's over with. We made that trade. We already have Bryce Young, but there's nothing that we can change. And so it is painful. People look at like a Caleb Williams or Drake May. It's like, oh, we could have had that person. But to be honest, if they had an average quarterback last year, an average, they didn't trade away DJ Moore, maybe they wouldn't have had the first overall pick this year. And so it's just a weird game of like, what could have happened, what if, or whatever. But it is painful because we know that Bryce Young needs a big play wide receiver, a talented offensive line, and we have to wait until the second round. And some of our hopes, or some of my hopes, kind of like, I look at the Los Angeles Rams. I know the Panthers are not in the same realm as the Los Angeles Rams, but they've gone so many consecutive years without first round picks. They've been fine. There's other instances where other teams have gone without first round picks. And so it's not necessarily not having that number one overall pick, but what do you do with the other picks? Because they've been terrible these last few years with their other picks. And so who cares if we have a first number one overall pick if you keep messing up every draft pick that you have? And so that's the philosophy that I'm holding on to.
That is true. Well, that does it for us. Thank you to Edgar Salmingo Jr. for joining us. Follow him at Panthers Analyst on X/Twitter. And if you're in North Carolina, go sign up. Pre-registration begins March 1st, March 11th. You can place your first bets. Thanks for watching.